Test, test. Good morning and welcome to BBC News. Today's top headlines. Albsy breaks down his collaboration with Digital Koala called Astro. Let's fucking go. This is Astro with Digital Koala, as I've just said. This is not the final project. Digital Koala did the finishing touches and just sort of wrapped it up however many months ago it was now. But we're going to go through it, sort of solo off some elements and just break it down a little bit. So for those that aren't familiar, this is Astro.
T-minus 30 seconds.
So, start off with the bases. It's quite interesting how he did these ones. What is going on with these lot? Come back to that. So the bases, obviously, are sub, real thick, warm low end. Courtesy of Digital Koala, that. Proper nice sub, that. Again, dark, but yet gritty and maintains a bit of mid-range in there as well, which just helps fit it in nicely with the mids and the tops. So our mid bass, which is sort of the key part of Astro bass. And here there's a heavy sidechain on that, and in the bass mids there isn't really much low end anyway, so that's why we need the sub to be that bit grittier, just to fill in what we're missing in the bass mid. And something I've realised that Digital Koala does as well is he really does take a lot of mids off of his basses and adds it into the subs, just the sub feels more prominent and sort of audible instead of just being sort of sat underneath. The bass top, this is just a real sort of small layer. Just to accentuate the sort of main notes. You got the dun 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 dun. It's just to sort of accentuate those main melody notes, not the little ones in between. There's also this little what do I call this? Boing bass. Yeah. Again, little accents in the gaps. Something I do all the time, as I'm sure you'll know, as I do with impacts, etc. So all of the basses together. In fact, we've got one more wob, which comes in on the second 16 of the drops. Again, accentuating those main notes. So here is all the layers together. We'll go from here and then we'll hear the wob come in as well. And then actually, yeah, in the second 16, I've also added in my little kind of signature hit on the first of each four. Just on the first hit. And again, it's just an added detail because otherwise it's the same repeating into the second part. So just by taking off the first hit and replacing with that bass, it just gives it a bit of variety and switches it up. And the bass mid has a little bit of evolution in there throughout. Obviously, you can hear. And then for every 8 bars, there's an alternation between the two sort of bass patches. Just again, keeping it fresh, keeping it moving. We don't get bored hearing that bass sound over and over. What else can we have a look at in here? So we've got some vinyl noise. This is something Digital Koala uses a lot. It's super quiet. It's tiny bit of static in the background. We've got this little. In fact, let's just start at the top and work our way down. And I think that'll be the best option. So we've got the pre-drop vocal. In the final version, there's a lot more vocal in the build-up and samples, etc. All of them are taken from NASA and SpaceX for like mission call-outs, etc. Here's the main one.
T-minus 30 seconds.
Which is from NASA website. If you go to NASA website audio, and then you can go to downloads, you can download most of the audio from missions they've done in the past. Some really cool stuff in there. Some of the like Houston, we have a problem. Obviously, use that in Houston. There's loads of cool stuff in there, little details. If not even to use as like a pre-drop, you could cut it up and use that in the drop as little shouts, etc. But for this case, it worked perfect there. And like I said, in the later version, there's much more vocal in that build-up. I say vocal, it's like a sample, you know what I mean? So yeah, little pre-drop vocal. Obviously, our kick drums for the main kick and the build-up. Just like taking a bit of high end off the kick and turn it down for the build-up. Just so that way, when the drop does hit, that kick's going to feel a lot heavier because we've had it quieter in the build-up. Our clap. Each of these stems are made up of multiple sounds, so the kick's got multiple kicks in there, the clap's got multiple kicks. This is just obviously the fourth version of the collab, so things have been sort of consolidated a little bit. We've got a top loop. Subtle background percussion. Little like offbeat little jumps, keeping it alive. Hi-hat. And then open hat. And one thing we did in this actually, which is pretty cool, you can see in the drop, every 4 bars, we're going to add in a new hi-hat essentially. So you can see obviously we start with a closed hat. Second 8 bars, we introduce the open hat. And then we bring in an old hat for the second 16. And then a ride just at the very end. Keeping it moving, keeping it moving. We can see that the ride's not using the second drop. What we actually did was use it the entirety of the second drop when we redid that down the line. And we've also got a little snare roll, end of every sort of 2 bars or 4 bars. Again, ear candy detail, just giving it that swing and a little bit of like excitement. We've also got our main snare build that runs for the entirety of the build up and then just sort of comes in and out in the drop. To be honest, I think the snares are a big part of this track, like that groove. I think without that, the little, if we add the basses in and we do that transition, let's play like a with and without. So no snares for the bass transition. It doesn't sound bad. Like I quite like gaps like that, but what a difference it makes having the snare detail in there. It just doesn't stop moving. It's just there's no gap, there's no kind of wind down. It's just filling in the gaps and you keep it moving. We've also got some percussion here. 3 lots of percussion. So the first 2 are layers. So layer 1. And that's just an industrial scrape. So I downloaded an industrial sample pack of like bangs and crashes, and there was like a metal scrape, like a shh. I cut, edited the ADSR to make it really sort of like almost plucky. And then that's a layer on top of the perk just to give it that bit of roughness. And then we've got perk 2. Another industrial scrape, a bit reverbed, a little bit more prolonged, the 2 together. Proper industrial, but also it's not percussion. It feels like percussion. So if we combine that, we'll do that in a minute. We'll combine that with the other bits. But then we have percussion 3 as well. That's layered with a kick, believe it or not. It's a really short rim sample with a really short kick underneath just to give it that little bounce. Because I find with percussion, it's easy to lose out in the mid-range, especially when you've got loads of other elements that are kicking in about 200 to 100 hertz. Adding that little bit of a kick underneath that perk just help bring it through the mix slightly. So let's do all of the drums together. Clap, top, and kick. Well, actually, we've got percussion 4 as well, which comes in again just where the ride does the last part of the drop. And that one's more of like a garagey kind of shuffle. Just giving it a bit of groove and change up the rhythm a little bit towards the end of that drop. We've got some Atmos here. So again, more static. Stuff like this makes such a difference to intros and stuff. Without it, it can feel empty and just sort of robotic. Adding atmosphere, rain sounds, vinyl static gives it a bit of like a human feel and just makes it a little bit more natural. And Atmos 2, I believe, is our main sort of, yeah. And that's a really long drony pad in Serum. Reverb the fuck out. A little bit of movement here and there. Very industrial again. We've also got pads here. Bear in mind, again, this is an earlier version, so these might not be in the version you know now. There's the, yeah. I'm going to give you one guess as to what I made that sound on. If you guessed Poison, you're right. Most people thinking I'm using Sakura. Poison actually, off the back of Sakura, when I made this, I wanted to find an alternative to Sakura as to something else I can get kind of cool sounds out of that's native to FL that isn't Sakura. I'll rinse that plugin to death. And Poison's pretty cool. There's a lot of parameters you can edit. It actually looks really cool as well. I gelled with it really nicely. I found this little preset, Atmos Cycles. I've done a bit of processing to it myself, editing it around, but it has this really ominous kind of vibrato-y pluck. I love that. Really love that. We've also got pad 2. Again, I'm not sure what this one is doing just yet. Yeah. Now that one I know for a fact is Sakura. I used that exact sound in Combat, I believe, later down the line. The two together, although they don't play at the same time, are super cool. Love that, love that. Really ominous. We've got a main pad down here, which actually didn't get used. Yeah, I can probably see why we didn't use that. It doesn't work, doesn't gel too well. That's most of the melodics. We go down to effects. We got what we got here. So moving into the effects side of things after this, we've got a synth. Super bizarre. You wouldn't think that that's even in there or would work, but it does. I can't remember what that is. That's the Digital Koala special. However he's made that. I presume some kind of melodic loop cut and just echoed, repeated, woo, 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 with some kind of phaser in it or flanger possibly. Very small detail in this track though. I'll turn it up a lot just to show you. Got an old loop. This is again for atmospherics, tying in with the rain sounds and vinyl static. That layers with the hi-hat, so it gives the hi-hat a bit of depth and a bit of thickness to it as well. LFO noise. Now that, believe it or not, is the Street Fighter kind of sword swoop, or like, don't quote me on the Street Fighter bit, not 100%, but I know for a fact it's one of those kind of sweeping sword sounds that's been cut, one hit, repeated, 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 repeated. And then it kind of filters in and out. We've got obviously a chant. It's not an Aldi track about a chant. A vocal pad in the drop. Again, probably not a detail you'd pick up on when you hear the track as a whole. When you break it down, again, this comes in on the second 16. So when there's been new additions with a bass, this little Vox pad's just, again, accentuating certain notes. and bringing the melody to life a little bit more, just creating that variation in the second half, basically. So this is some of the cooler details, the kind of ear candy fillers. So the effects delay, pretty, you can guess which one this is. FX magic. So those two together are the life and soul of the effects of Astro, I believe. In the pre-drop, without these two, it's dead. We've also got an effects roll just before the second 16, so this is a big transitional marker, which is a gated, I believe, it almost sounds like a gated machine gun. Whether that is what it is, I don't know. I believe, again, that's from Digital Koala, but to me, that sounds like a gated machine gun, which is fucking sick. We got an effect shot just before the drop. So those three together. Vinyl noise we've covered. We've got some noise on the build-up. Again, so industrial. I'm guessing that's some kind of percussion loop, delayed and reverbed out. Uplifters, pretty self-explanatory. A lot of the effects in this are very sci-fi based, obviously, to tie in with Astro. So there's a lot of sounds you probably wouldn't hear me use normally in this one. Obviously, impacts. Very soft impact, not much punch in that low end. Again, more sort of mid-range for air than it is for like low-end punch. So yeah, that's all of the stems and parts of Astro. Hopefully this has been useful. Like I said in the post today, what I'm aiming to do is one track breakdown a week, surrounded by shorter, more concise production tips and tricks. So if you make it this far in this video, let me know in the comments what you want to see for next week's track breakdown. Big thank you to Henry on the request to break down Albzy and Digital Koala Astro. Big up.